We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist, Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Wednesday, June 3rd, 2026. And today we're going to discuss how the anti-weaponization 1776 We the People Fund is dead on arrival. Also, the United States is going to integrate its military even further with the Israelis. Big tech is shutting down end-to-end encryption and wanting to release millions of mosquitoes into the wild. And finally, further devolution of the new term anti-tech violent extremism. So let's get after it. I got in late last night. I took my boys to go see wrestling NXT, which aired on the CW, which I think used to do like Seventh Heaven and Smallville, but now they do professional wrestling. So it was really cool, but it required a late night drive. So I'm kind of a little bit haggard. I'm a little bit tired today. I'm going to be leaning a little bit into the videos to make the points I want to make because I have a cause for concern. I'm going to get them in their own words to explain it, to really amplify the message that I have. But really, the genesis for everything that I want to say today, in regards to the news cycle that is every single day, is I saw one of the most disturbing and un-American and unpatriotic things to ever come out of the United States federal government via social media yesterday or day before yesterday. And I need to share it and use it as a launch-off point. Now, not your mama's show, it's your daddy's show. And if anything today, I will not be merciful.
Am I not merciful?
Am I not merciful?
And we're going to go back to our Hulk Hogan metaphor that we tried yesterday. America is nostalgic, not for the leg drops, but for the principles that they were firmly planted into. The Hulk rules: train, take your vitamins, say your prayers. What are our essentials? What are our core basics? What are our foundational beliefs? Promote the general welfare, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and get the heck out of my way. So when I saw the following from the White House, I was a really, really disturbed person. From the White House on Twitter: trust in Trump. Just sit back and relax, and it will all work out well in the end. It always does. President Donald J. Trump. That is something that no American who is grounded in our principles should ever contemplate. Sit back, relax, wait on the government to fix things. That's a fundamentally un-American, unpatriotic principle. And yet, that is currently where we stand right now. So if that's what the ask is, because I guess we're in a post-constitutional country, the social compact completely dissolved and shattered. The deal that was struck 250 years ago is just dead on arrival, very much like the 1776 We the People Fund, which we're about to touch on. Well, then I suppose we'll have to give them the opportunity to prove just how well it's going to work out. So let's begin actually at that 1776 fund, where they're now backing away from it. So from, again, social media, this one from the Department of Justice's Twitter page. The DOJ disagrees strongly with the decision on the anti-weaponization fund put forth by the United States District Court judge in the Eastern District of Virginia, wherein the court stated that under no circumstances may the DOJ proceed with the anti-weaponization fund recently established in order to make up for the tremendous abuse, harm, and hate unfairly shown to so many people, etc., etc. The fund was the result of a deal that was struck by Donald Trump with his own Department of the Treasury and with the IRS. Trump and his kids sued the IRS, said you leaked their tax documents, $10 billion lawsuit, but we'll settle. We don't want any money. We just want the apology. And we want the Department of Justice to establish this slush fund, $1.776 billion, because it's a marketing scheme and a ploy, 1776. And we've gone into it multiple times before, but there was such tremendous pushback that they buckled. So sit back, relax. It'll all end up great in the end. And then they punt. So much further on into this story I actually got from Axios. Scoop, Trump admin plans to drop weaponization fund. And they here cite Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, endorsed by the President of the United States in his re-election bid. Republican Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and other Republican lawmakers raised concerns about oversight, precedent, and the use of taxpayer dollars. Really, the Republicans in charge of both houses of Congress and the White House for the last 2 years, who have spent more money than has ever been spent in the history of the United States government, they're worried about the expenditures. Guys, the United States government spent $90 billion on the NASA program, the Artemis, that's sending the astronauts to space. The most recent one cost what? $4 billion to send 4 people jetting past the moon and coming home in 6 days. How did we advance our society? How did we prosper from that? When we heard from the lead, the captain on that mission, he came back and said, the American people, they can't possibly understand the experience that we had, because when we were up there, we really missed our families. Because the American people, for $4 billion of money that was stolen, tax from us, sent those 4 jerks on a moon mission where they didn't land on the moon. They just went further past the moon than anybody ever, because I guess the view is better when you're further on, because you don't want to sit on the front row at the professional wrestling event to see Hulk Hogan. You really want to be in the Goodyear blimp that is orbiting on top of the arena, because the view is so much better. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. We dropped $4 billion on that for 4 people to take a joyride. But 1776 fund, $1.7 billion, that's just a bridge too far for the likes of fiscal conservatives in the GOP like Lindsey Graham. Well, really what it was an opportunity for the likes of Lindsey Graham, Lady Graham, who can't figure out where his war boner is coming from next. Is it going to be in Persia, or is it going to be in the Caribbean? He doesn't know. He really wants to be have multiple units. That would be great for him. The GOP actually was excited because this weaponization fund, that was the opportunity that they've been waiting for to not do their job, not fulfill on the very few tasks that the American people demanded of them when they give them the ring of power in November of 2024. Mass deportations, border sovereignty, border security. Let's eject all of the foreigners, the millions upon millions who were allowed to come in during the Joe Biden auto pen administration. And the Republicans, who they're just so smart. They're great negotiators. They're following their leader, their dear leader in the White House, and they have the art of the deal. So they came up with a fantastic decision that what they really wanted to do, what they ought to do, was fund our Department of Homeland Security, but don't fund border security. ICE, Customs, Border Protection. We're actually going to put those fundings mechanisms into a subsequent bill that won't need to get to a supermajority, a filibuster proof, so that we can just get it through 51-49 and everybody wins. High fives, back slaps, pom-pom waving, helmet stickers, and then dag nabbit. It's that anti-weaponization fund. That's the sticking point, I guess. I guess we can't fund the border. So they didn't. They just left town. And this has really been the holdup until something else becomes the holdup and they just can't quite get it across the finish line. But do remember, cast your vote this November for the likes of Lady Graham and his ilk. And really, as we're talking about Department of Homeland Security, there has been quite a bit of back and forth amongst the principals or former principals who are there, who are weighing in on the merits of the mass deportations or lack thereof with the current administration. I told you guys, I got a cause for concern. They're not fulfilling any of the promises that were made, any of the demands of the American people, which are not that voluminous. Enforce the border and deport illegal aliens like you said you would. We're going to hold you accountable to your own promises. The largest, greatest mass deportation effort in the history of the country. I'm still waiting on that. I mean, we're on track to deport less than 1 million illegal aliens this year. And that's if we count the border people, the guys that just get intercepted there as opposed to in the interior, which is what we really need. But how about some sniping back and forth, some disagreements? So first video that I want to get to actually comes from Greg Bovino, who used to run things back at Customs and Border Protection and was doing the aggressive deportation, the EROs, the enforcement removal operations, that then we had to back off from because we have to be kinder and gentler, appease the mean girls' friends. We don't want to offend the sensibilities of CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, because their approval is more important than the American people who put us here with a mission set to actually follow through on border enforcement. But Greg Bovino recently appeared, and this one's a little bit longer than normal. It's about 2 minutes, and he was asked about goings on and happenings with mass deportations. And look, he's no longer in the government. He has a First Amendment protected activity, and actually he's doing this from Portugal, not in America. Asked about it. Here is Mr. Bovino's opinions on Markwayne Mullin and the true number of illegal aliens who are in the United States.
Remigration, or is he falling short of that? They have the Office of Remigration, they talk about it on social media, but are the policies, is that actually remigration in the way you understand it?
Sure, and over the past year, that remigration did actually occur with your definition of remigration, and there's still 100 million illegal aliens in the United States. They've got a long way to go. So I think they need to pick that pace up there in the United States very rapidly so that they can achieve that goal.
And that figure of 100 million is a lot bigger than most other people would say. Where's the disparity between your figure and what other research institutes would say?
Sure, most other research institutes have had that same figure for 40 or 50 years now. In the 1970s, it was 12 to 20 million. 2006, 20 million was about as high as you could get. But we didn't see that occurring both on the border and in the interior of the United States. I think it's woefully short. A lot of those, say Pew Research, for instance, I think they're very politically driven, and you're not getting an accurate number.
One last question, sorry. You were a bit dismissive of Markwayne Mullin interview with Vox Europa this week. You called him, I think, a good plumber. Do you think there needs to be change within the administration in the US to properly implement mass deportation?
I think there's going to have to be changes there to implement true mass deportations, because there's tens of millions that need to go, and we need to do that now.
And why isn't Trump doing that?
And I think Trump does a fantastic job. I will always say that President Trump's the best I've ever worked for. He's the one president that we've never had, at least in the past 75 years, that is actually willing to do that. So he needs a little bit better advice, and Mullin's a great guy, great plumber, no doubt about that. He can probably fix a leaky faucet, but 100 million illegal aliens is not a leaky faucet.
100 million illegal aliens, according to Greg Bovino. Yeah, but what would he know? He only worked for CBP for 30 years. And he's saying that the number that I'm throwing out there is maybe half of what it actually was. Now, look, he might be using some hyperbole, some exaggeration, but 100 million illegal aliens? And we're not even going to get rid of 1 million over the course of a year. But the administration, the principals within it, they had to snap back. They had to respond. They don't want to look weak. That's a cause for concern, right? You got to make sure that you take quite a bit of umbrage. And that's why Markwayne Mullin had to reply, look, I'm not just a plumber. In fact, I'm an important person who's at the helm, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And what are you? You're just a plebeian swine, somebody who doesn't know anything, somebody who've moved on and doesn't know what the true battlefield conditions are. So Markwayne Mullin saw fit to reply. He was asked about it because the media is always trying to spin up and gin up lots of drama, being asked about the insult from Greg Bovino, calling him a very effective plumber.
One other question.
Yes.
Former Border Patrol official Gregory Bovino has been critical, saying...
I never met the guy. I never met the guy. No, he's irrelevant to me. I don't know who he is. What else, guy?
He's irrelevant to me. He's irrelevant to me. Dude, are you literate? Have you read a book ever? I mean, I know that you don't know what the word scapegoat is, but he's irrelevant to me. I got a cause for concern. is this guy paying attention to anything? Look, you might feel insulted by Greg Bovino calling you out for going soft, doing the mean girls, pulling back on any of the mass deportation efforts. You could defend your honor, I guess, to a certain level, or you could try to do what Mark Wayne Mullen is there saying, hey, look, I don't want to comment on it, but I got cause for concern because Mark Wayne Mullen has been at the helm of the Department of Homeland Security now for what, like a month or two? And we're finding out more and more every single day how his actual true desire is to not have the media say mean things about him. Look, he answered that question really quickly and was like, hey, does anybody else have anything for me to say? Because I'd like to talk about things so I can get my face on TV and really be the face of the kinder, gentler deportation efforts that are not going to happen. And don't pay attention to the reports that have come out of the southern border, how we're changing, how we're counting, how we're deporting people when we're just stopping them from coming across the border. That'll count so we can juke the stats, and the American people aren't privy to what's actually going on and how we're making no progress towards deporting the 20, 30, in the case of Bovino's estimate, 100 million illegal aliens. But I guess Mark Wayne Mullen could be forgiven because was maybe too busy to have met with Greg Bovino, as somebody who was experienced, because he was too busy defending Ashley Babbitt's murderer. This is him commenting on Lieutenant Michael Byrd
in the Capitol.
I guarantee you, I don't know for a fact, but I guarantee you he's never had to pull his weapon in a manner like that before.
Pause. I can guarantee you, and I don't know, but I can guarantee you. So you don't know anything about what you're saying. We can just disregard everything. And the freeze frame of Mark Wayne Mullen's dumbass face here is really nice. If you happen to be listening on Spotify, you should flip it on. Back to the video again from, at the time, Representative Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma.
He was the last person in the world that ever wanted to use force like that. And he wasn't wanting to do that. I know for a fact, because after it happened, he came over and he was physically and emotionally distraught. And I actually gave him a hug. And I said, sir, you did what you had to do. And I mean that. Unfortunately, the young lady, her family's life has changed, and it was an unfortunate situation that she lost her life and some people lost their loved ones. But the lieutenant's life has also changed too, because if it's the first time you've ever had to use lethal force, that doesn't ever leave you. And it wasn't his choice. He didn't show up to work that day to have to do that.
Do we know that? Do we have any assurances of that? Certainly he had his mental faculties enough, Lieutenant Michael Byrd, to get on the radio after having smoked Ashley Babbitt and saying that she was shooting at him to try to cover his butt. So Mark Wayne Mullen ascribing some sort of benevolence, magnanimousness to Lieutenant Michael Byrd because he had no intention. I can guarantee you that, even though I have no knowledge of what's going on here. He was doing his job, and he got put in a situation where he had to do his job because there was members still in the balcony. And if you're going to present your weapon in a manner and give commands and they still don't listen and they still approach, you don't have a choice, because either you have to, at that point, discharge your weapon in a manner of self-defense, or that weapon's going to be taken away from you. It's going to. So Mark Wayne Mullen, who's now at the helm of Department of Homeland Security, which has funding somewhere in the area of like $300 billion. It's a law enforcement entity, amongst other things, has no idea about use of force, deadly force. So the police officer pulled out a firearm to give verbal instructions, which is an immediate escalation within the use of force continuum. You should only be withdrawing that weapon if there is an actual threat that is there. And Ashley Babbitt had not presented that, but he pulled out his gun so he could give verbal orders with a little bit more oomph in them. And Mark Wayne Mullen says that that's appropriate use of force. And then when the people who he was giving those verbal orders to did not comply, which she didn't give him an opportunity to comply, seeing as how she poked her head through a window and then he smoked her in the neck, well, then he just had to do it, because he had no choice. She was going to steal his gun from him. Again, Mark Wayne Mullen doesn't know his butt from a hole in the wall, which is why I have a cause for concern, because he's at the helm of the Department of Homeland Security, and they're charged with the mission that the American people voted for in November of 2024, mass deportations of illegal aliens. It is paramount that we enforce a border, that we have border sovereignty, that we eject millions and millions of illegal aliens from the country so that we can clean up things like our hospitals and our schools and our housing situation and the jobs. Everything is derivative of that. And yet Mark Wayne Mullen has pulled back on the reins. He wants to have good press, good PR, and anybody who's critical of him, he just can't even. And again, the guy doesn't know the word scapegoat. He doesn't know relevant. He says irrelevant to me. I think he's got an IQ that's hovering around 66. But what do I know? I can only assess everything that he said and all the failures that we've seen in the last couple of months. And that's just through the Department of Homeland Security. Now let's go over to ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, where Tulsi Gabbard announced a week or so ago that she's going to have to step away. Her husband's dealing with a cancer and she needs to be there for him. I don't know if that is the only reason. That's definitely the justification that she used. Maybe she wants to get out of Dodge because she's seeing things that are problematic. Certainly, we had some whistleblowers come out and say that there was quite a bit of resistance within the intelligence community. As an aside, in the really weird branch of the multiverse in which we live, I text messaged Tulsi Gabbard a week ago, and she replied, "Thank you." I mean, just said, thanks for everything you're doing. I wasn't really looking to engage in a long-term conversation with her, but yeah, it's kind of a weird existence that I live now with a non-restrictive waistband on one end and talking to high-level cabinet members on the other. But who's going to replace, at least temporarily, Tulsi Gabbard when she does step away? And do we have any reason to be concerned? Or is there going to be a steady hand at the wheel? I mean, just be calm, relax, rely on the government. Everything will be solved. Reporting from CBS News. Trump names controversial housing official Bill Pulte as acting director of national intelligence. So the statement that Donald Trump issued on his social media was, William has deep experience managing the most sensitive matters in America, the safety and soundness of the markets, and over $10 trillion at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, a substantial increase from where it was just 12 months ago. During this period, he will remain director of Federal Housing Finance Agency and chairman of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Congratulations to Director Pulte. So Bill Pulte, who is the director of Federal Housing and Finance Agency, is going to now be the chief spy for the United States federal government, the acting director of national intelligence, because he impressed the president, because he manages $10 trillion within Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which shouldn't exist because they're not in our pesky, dusty documents, not even in the good and plenty clause and invisible ink on the back of the Declaration of Independence. I don't think the government is involved in housing according to the prime directives that are enumerated within our pesky documents. But, that's kind of the battlefield conditions. Bill Pulte. So I don't know a whole lot about him other than he's made referrals over to the Department of Justice and asked them to charge Letitia James with mortgage fraud. I think he also made the referral over for Eric Swalwell, for Adam Schiff, and for one of those governors over at the Federal Reserve. So he seems to be kind of like doing the dirty work on behalf of the president, for using whatever they can to go after his political enemies. And look, if those people broke the law, there should be a mechanism. We don't need a two-tiered system of justice, but it's not a good look. It's certainly somebody at the Federal Housing Agency doing law enforcement activities is kind of a head scratcher. And what it actually is his background. He's managing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. What does he bring to the table? So I looked up Bill Pulte, 38 years old. So not as old as I am, which makes me feel a little bit old. But again, guys, it's kind of cool being 40. I am, after all, a man.
Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
He went to Northwestern and got a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism, which should translate quite nicely to the intelligence sector for reasons. Also, he worked in private equity. He claims that he is the inventor of Twitter philanthropy. So he would go out on social media and say, hey, if you follow me and I get to a certain number, then I'll donate some money. He basically worked in finance and then caught the eye of the president in 2019 because Donald Trump praised him by saying that he would give So Pulte said, I'll give 2 cars to 2 veterans if Donald Trump retweets me. So engagement farming from the president. And that really struck the fancy of the president of the United States and got him on the radar. And then he got into Republican politics and donated to the president's campaign for president in 2020 and in 2024. So he's a good and faithful servant. So now he gets to be in charge of all of America's intelligence. And don't worry about it, guys. He's engagement farmed online, learned about broadcast journalism, and knows how to do hedge fund stuff. So that should go really well for our national security. And really, as you talk about national security, I think that translates quite nicely into a concern that I have about our military industrial complex that's been now coming out here. This comes from Responsible Statecraft, Headline, Congress quietly moves to integrate U.S. and Israeli militaries. And this is all about the National Defense Authorization Act for 2027. And this is like always one of these big, gigantic bills that get fleshed out in Congress and they get held up and then pushed on forward in thousands of pages and they put a whole bunch of pork into it. So it's the NDAA. Anytime you hear it reported, that's what it is, the National Defense Authorization Act. So the draft was just released and there's a section in it, section 224. Like I said, it's thousands of pages. It's called the United States-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative, and it lays a groundwork for further working together with the Israeli military on producing weapons and licensing artificial intelligence, quantum mechanics, autonomous systems, directed energy weapons, cyber and biotech, like basically everything. But really, what it comes down to is making more and more representatives within our Article 1 branch of government, within the House and the Senate, elected officials, responsive to the needs of the Israeli government rather than necessarily their constituents. And one of the big ways that it's going to be pushed through via this NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, is that we're going to partner with the Israeli government, with the Israeli military, and then we're going to have jobs that are tied to it in the military industrial complex. So they're going to expand startups and co-production facilities in states. They already have a couple of them. I think it was Arkansas. Yeah, Arkansas and Mississippi. And the Israeli government is going to boast that, hey, look, we're producing these weapons. They're in America. So we're creating American jobs. And then the congressmen from those districts and the senators from those states are going to be more responsive to the Israeli needs because they're going to say, well, I don't want to sacrifice jobs in my district or my state or be blamed for that by hashtag resisting what the Israeli military's agenda is, which apparently is just to continue kinetic operations, definitely not wars. How dare you call me a stewardess? I'm a flight progress coordinator in Iran forever, more forever wars, right? That was just one of the few promises that the American people were reliably given in 2024, that we were done with wars. But I guess the status quo remains. We're just going to keep doing it more and more and more. All right. So I want to actually go into some big tech stuff because there's definitely some cause for concern there as well, guys. But before we do, want to make sure that I remind you, if you haven't already, please do give us a nice thumbs up here on YouTube and Rumble. It's AmRad Pod every weekday, noontime. Make sure you leave some comments in there. I try to respond to those when I can. And also, if you don't mind, you can head over to the Spotify channel as well. It is under AmRad Pod. We'll drop there after we get done with today's show. And I will try to drop the commercial in for right about now. And now let's talk about some encryption stuff, some big tech stuff, because we've got failed leadership coming from the White House, coming from Congress, coming from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice, all across the board. But who are our true masters? Who are really calling the shots? And I saw this and was a little bit concerned. When I say a little bit, I mean a lot of it. And this is an older article, actually, from Wired Magazine. It came out in March of this year, March 20th, 2026. And the headline reads, "The Danger Behind Meta Killing End-to-End Encryption for Instagram DMs Direct Messages." So from this piece, again, from March, so a couple months old, Meta spent the better part of a decade working to deploy end-to-end encryption by default across all of its chat apps. Meta controls Facebook and Instagram. So they were saying, hey, we're going to have encrypted messaging. Nobody's going to be able to see what it is in transit. You'll have added layers of security. We're going to work on it. We're going to get this thing done. But in the end, all they did was create an opt-in feature on Instagram. So if you pulled up Instagram, you want a message, you'd have to add the feature in the settings to say, yes, I want my messages to be encrypted. It didn't achieve anything else outside of that. So what gives, Meta? What gives big tech? I thought privacy and security were really, really important to you. Well, here's a statement that was given. Very few people were opting in to end-to-end encrypted messaging in DMs, so we're removing this option from Instagram in the coming months. Now, this was given in March. It is now expired. It was removed May 8th, so a little under a month ago was when this feature went away. So in essence, what Meta did was create the ability to encrypt your messaging and then make it really hard to find, and then optional to have it, and then remove it and by saying, well, nobody was using it because they had other things that were more important to them. So we're just not going to have that anymore. And really what Wired comes away with here is saying it was kind of a ploy for PR because Meta was concerned about its image. And they want to say, look, we're really concerned about privacy and security. There's been some breaches. We want to be there for the people that use our platforms. And really, that was why they were advertising it so heavily. I'm going to come up with and proffer an alternative, though. I think there's a lot of pressure from the government where they have a nice symbiotic relationship with big tech, regardless of who's in charge. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience that my wife sent private messages to people using Facebook when I first became a public-facing whistleblower. And within 30 minutes, her Facebook account was taken down. And all she said was that I'm Steve Friend's wife. So there was certain monitoring going on within big tech that was working hand in glove with the United States government. And that was during the bad old days, though, right? I mean, things are different now. We have no cause for concern. Just sit back, relax, and wait on the government to solve these things. Meanwhile, the government says that private industry has the capabilities, and yet they just, they can't follow through on it. They can't get it done. I guess the people don't want it, or maybe the government doesn't want it. They don't want their job to be harder. They want it to be easier to gain access to those sorts of communications that could be going on. I mean, you could be saying things that are misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, stuff that's true, but just inconvenient for what the government likes to message out there through its propaganda. That really, it can't possibly be 30, 40, 50, 100 million illegal aliens. No, it's 12 billion, like it was when I was in grade school, right? And then big tech follows through and delivers for the government. So what actually is in the end the interest for big tech? Well, I mean, they maintain their access to the government. There's not going to be any regulations, I'm sure. Maybe some nice partnerships going on here. We share data, or we're able to house cloud computing software. But really, they get to do other stuff, like intrude on people's lives, not just via technology and data, but through ecosystems. I saw this in The Guardian, and you tell me why we shouldn't be extremely concerned. Headline: Google requests permission to release 32 million mosquitoes in California and Florida. Now, the U.S. EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is reviewing a Google request to release up to 16 million mosquitoes annually in Florida and California over the span of 2 years. The EPA will decide whether to greenlight the request, and they're going to take public comment, and that public comment will end this week, June 5th. So if you don't like mosquitoes in California and Florida at the behest of Google, you might want to drop a comment in there if you actually think that it matters. So the approach that Google is using is they have some genetically altered mosquitoes that they're saying, hey, they're going to breed or attempt to breed with the females, and then the eggs don't hatch. So we're going to bring down the mosquito population. So that's the goal of Google. All right, I got concern and I got a couple questions. How does Google have 32 million mosquitoes? Aren't they a search engine? What sort of access do they have to the federal government where they're able to just like push this on through and have it sound reasonable and nobody within the Donald Trump administration, the EPA, Lee Zeldin appointed by Donald Trump, is saying like, for the last 10 years, if you type in Donald Trump into the news feature of Google, it's something that says that he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. I mean, if you try to look up Donald Trump assassination, it doesn't auto-populate. It says things like President Truman assassination or Donald Duck assassination. So how are they an ally now that they would feel comfortable? And look, what are the ecosystem, environmental impacts that could possibly happen? What are the downstream consequences? Does it sound good to eliminate mosquitoes? I mean, look, they attack, you get the mosquito bites, they're really annoying, but aren't they kind of vital to certain ecosystems? Like, isn't there this circle of life that we learned about and how there's integral involvement? And maybe perhaps we shouldn't be playing God with genetically altered diseases, because I say diseases, these mosquitoes, they have a genetically altered bacteria that they carry, which means that somebody wearing a white lab coat in a biolab engineered bacteria and injected it into a whole bunch, and by that I mean 32 million mosquitoes, and said, yeah, this will probably work out. Now, we could use that as a launch off point to talk about coronavirus and how a biolab allowed a pandemic to go around, because it definitely wasn't a bat that flew 600 miles and barfed into a stew that caused the epidemic that grew into a global pandemic that necessitated shutting down of the economy and you not going to work your non-essential job that you use to feed your family and pay your mortgage. Stay home and stay safe and just trust the government. But actually, I want to take it to a different one. This is a blast from the past. I talked about this, man, gosh, probably last year at some point, because it dealt with insects and the ability to manipulate. And I've seen this actually coming out more and more. And just as a nice reminder, this is a paper called Beneficial Blood Sucking, and it comes from Bioethics, and it's all about AGS, which is the alpha-gal syndrome. And it is a condition that is borne by Lone Star ticks, and they bite on people and give them a red meat allergy. So you get bit by the tick, and then you have the allergy, and now you are allergic to beef and can't eat beef anymore. And what actually gets argued here by these biologists, these bioethicists, is that they, in good conscience, have to proliferate this disease. They have to put it into ticks so that more people get bit, and then more people can't consume red meat because red meat is bad for the environment. It's probably creating a hole in the ozone layer and all the acid rain. So they took it upon themselves to do that. Very much like Google is taking it upon themselves to put a bacteria in 32 million mosquitoes and then just release them into the wild. And maybe if the EPA is like, I don't know about that. Damn, it's too late, guys. I guess we must have had a leak. What are the odds that that happens? Some cause for concern. And do you really have the steady hands on the wheel there that are making these decisions, that are deciding, yeah, it's probably in the best interest of California and Florida, two of our most populated states, or the rest of the country, because at the last time I checked, mosquitoes can fly. They're like the bats. They can move from one spot to another. It's going to have massive consequences on ecosystems, not just in 2 states in America. We have the steady hands on the wheel, though, at the government level. They're making these decisions. People like, 38-year-old investors who are now in charge of intelligence for the entire government. But, just sit back, relax, trust the plan. It'll all end up well in the end. It'll all end up well, particularly from a law enforcement perspective, when you have a growing mission set, when you have the ability through the government to categorize people who are problematic and label them as terrorists. We talked about it, the devolution from terrorism to homegrown violent extremism to domestic terrorism, which might mean militia violent extremism, or agave, anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists, people with the perception of government overreach, or racially motivated violent extremists, people who go to Latin Mass who are pro-life, to then nihilistic violent extremists, which we covered down on yesterday, which effectively are people who have no ideology but are just pedophiles, but we call them terrorists so we can justify our existence. And now we have the new one, the anti-tech violent extremists. Those are people who the government deems to be problematic domestic terrorists because they don't like data centers. So the latest evolution of that, the anti-tech violent extremists, now we have an example, guys. Now we have local police going to the house of somebody who they deem to be engaging in wrong thing and engaging in First Amendment protected activity, but really, you need to go to jail because you say things that make us unhappy. Here is local police in Illinois, Dixon, Illinois, guys, not North Korea, going and knocking on this guy's door and putting him in jail. It's about 2 minutes long. We're going to give it a play, though.
Punks right here came by because I'm trying to organize a community protest against a representative who's trying to push in a data center owned by a out-of-state company trying to suck up all our energy. I made a post. I made an event on Facebook trying to organize the community to get together. And what's your badge number? Name and badge number?
I'm Detective Henson.
And name and badge number?
Sharp. SHRP and it's 160.
Okay, yeah.
So
No, I have a First Amendment right to protest, and if I organize a protest on a public road, there's nothing wrong with that. I sent an email to that representative, and I can show you the email. I never made a threat. I told no, this is my house, and I'm going to talk. You guys are on my property trying to intimidate me because I'm organizing a protest against a data center. Then why are you here?
Well, that's if you let me. Okay, so first off, do you want to talk about this?
Talk about what? There's nothing to talk about. I'm organizing a protest, and I'm allowed to do that. It's a First Amendment protected activity.
110%.
Yeah.
The issue is some of the communication, the Facebook posts. I would disagree that there's.
I haven't made a single threat. Tell me what threat I made.
Okay. Well, you know what you posted.
No, give me a quote me. Quote a threat, because I didn't make one. I'm organizing a protest on a public street, demanding a representative.
What about the safety of his children?
Huh?
What about the safety of his children?
Someone else made a comment about the safety of his children.
Did you?
No.
You didn't?
No, what I said if he valued his children's safety, he probably wouldn't be trying to ruin the world that they're being brought up on. And that isn't a threat. That's the fact that I'm watching this man ruin the world around here. And yes, I'm allowed to say that if someone cares about their kids, they shouldn't destroy the community that their kids are being raised in. That's not a threat.
The problem is you didn't say that in the post.
Yes, I did.
You did not.
Pull it up. Pull it up and read it.
Looked at it.
Pull it up and read it.
I've been dealing with this all afternoon.
Cool. Pull it up and read it.
Okay. So that's the concerning part is obviously, yes, you have the right to make an event, you have the right to public protest, everything else, right? But
I never made a threat.
Okay. Well, we disagree, and our state's attorney disagrees. Okay, so you're going to be charged today for a couple of offenses.
Seriously? I'm going to get charged for what?
For stalking and intimidation.
For stalking? When did I ever go to his house?
So we'll explain it to you more. Okay, so you are going to be placed under arrest right now, okay?
And then they proceed to put this dude in handcuffs. Now, we'll go into this story because we're getting this perspective here. This dude takes a video and is actually doing a live stream. It's gotten some millions of views. But I found a little bit more details about what actually happened. The guy who gets arrested there, his name is Harley DeLander. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Headline for this one, and again, I'll put the link to it in the notes for today. Data center opponent arrested after police said he threatened a local official. The Dixon Police Department said that Harley DeLander was charged with 2 felonies, intimidation and stalking, after it received information about his communication with the former lawmaker. There's a guy who's now lobbying for data centers in their area. The department alleged that DeLander knowingly and willfully communicated threats and engaged in a course of conduct that caused concern for the safety of the victim and his family. Now, according to Mr. DeLander, he said he started organizing a protest on Facebook that would take place near the victim's house using an address he found on the internet. He said that he sent an email to the former representative asking him to recuse himself from his position, along with the wording of, "If you know what's good for you and your family." From DeLander, quote, "What I meant by that was the sentence prior to that. Your address is public information, and I can protest in front of your house all day and night until you gain humanity and ban this data center." He actually, because he gives context, he said, "I actually wrote it down. I literally wrote it down. If you know what's good for you and your family, I'm going to protest outside your house." He provided context to the media source. He provided context to law enforcement. Now, is this guy kind of a jerk? Yeah. Is being a jerk illegal? No. Should you go to people's houses and protest outside them? No. It's kind of a douche move. Is it illegal? No. No, it's not, unless you're trying to threaten or intimidate. This guy was trying to just protest. Again, do I approve of his mechanisms and his methods? No. I think he should go protest somewhere else. I think a man's home is his castle. Is it a felony, though? No. Is it a cause for concern when local police take this up and say, ooh, that's an anti-tech violent extremism? We should probably go and investigate and put this guy in jail. What are the odds that the federal government now is going to have an appetite to do this, to go around and deploy their agents to people's houses for Facebook posts where they say, I don't like data centers? I thought we were sticking with the nostalgia and the patriotism that we talked about yesterday, where we were grounded in certain principles like First Amendment protected activity to express yourself, to speak and assemble and have civil liberties, and not have problematic people within the government go after you because they don't like your position on things, not have people who have access to government, like a former lawmaker, call up a state's attorney and say, deploy the brown shirts to this guy because he's giving me a case of the feels. No. I think it's a fundamentally un-American and unpatriotic position to say that you're not allowed to speak freely because we don't like the message that you're putting out there. I think it's fundamentally un-American to say, I'm going to sit back and relax and just trust the plan because it's going so well right now. Don't you agree? Now, we're going to go with one more story before we close it out today. Because as we're sitting back and relaxing and we're trusting the plan because it'll all work out well in the end, when you have a First Amendment protected activity to say things that just the government likes. We had this whole thing with the former director of the FBI, James Comey, putting seashells on the sandy seashore and saying 8647, and he's been indicted for threats to the president. Well, they're going to have a harder time proving that. And I said at the time, there's no way that this passes muster. And I've had pushback from people within media and government saying, oh, there's more to it, Steve. There were secret messages, don't you know? He wrote a fiction novel about secret messages, and that's the proof that they needed. So this guy's totally going to jail. Well, it's not going to happen. From ABC, and this isn't about James Comey, it's about a different group that was under scrutiny for flying a flag, as you see there, that says 8647, which I don't think they sewed out of nylon. I think they probably bought it on Amazon, like you can buy flags that say 8646 and 8645, because it's not illegal. There's a legal dispute. It stemmed from an ongoing demonstration in Washington, D.C., held by a progressive group, Accountability Now USA, in order to, in the group's words, quote, call attention to the rise of fascism in the United States and demand the impeachment of President Trump, unquote. They're allowed to do it. It doesn't matter who your boy is, if it's the auto pen, Roomba dude, Joe Biden, or Donald Trump 47. They're allowed to do it. And they've been flying this flag that says 8647. And Secret Service began investigating them for threats to the president. So a judge has now ruled on it. And we come to find out it's an Obama judge. So, he's a communist who actually knows what the First Amendment says, though. Quote from the judge, although the court recognizes the importance and difficulty of the mission of the Secret Service, the First Amendment does not permit the government to censor political speech, which no reasonable observer would view in context as actually conveying a threat of violence merely because the speaker uses a phrase that, in addition to other common meanings, has been used to refer to an act of violence. First Amendment protected activity, not a true threat. Just like sending an email or posting on Facebook, and that if you knew it was good for your kids because your house is publicly listed and you should change your position on this because otherwise I'll protest outside. Otherwise, I will protest and exercise my First Amendment right outside your house. Not a true threat. Just like waving a flag is not a true threat. And yet, trust the plan, guys. Sit back, relax, because only the steadiest hands are on the wheel. People like Mark Wayne Mullen, who doesn't know anything about use of force, deadly force, and in fact was hugging people who engaged in illegal actions, violations of policy. I would argue post-meditated murder of people like Ashley Babbitt, who were involved in First Amendment protected activity and not a true threat, and yet lost their lives. Mark Wayne Mullen, though, he's at the helm. He's the guy who's in charge of deporting, as Greg Bovino estimates it, 100 million illegal aliens. But, he's not relevant. He's irrelevant to Mark Wayne Mullins, the guy who doesn't know how to pronounce anything that's above 2 syllables, apparently. Or, investor guys, real estate gurus who are now making referrals over to the Department of Justice, guys who are in charge of our intelligence apparatus because they handled Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Trust the plan. Trust the plan. The plan that says that, big tech should really be in charge of most stuff now because they make the best decisions, like let's ease up on encryptions and security measures for our users, and at the same time releasing millions of infected mosquitoes into the wild, because we know what's best. We're really smart. We know the ones and zeros, so we probably know about biology really well. I don't trust the plan. I don't trust what the president said in his tweet, what the White House said. It'll all be fine. Sit back and relax. That's fundamentally un-American. That's unpatriotic. What Americans do is do America. We handle our business. We don't sit back and wait on the government, because every time we do, it results in a bunch of brown shirts at your door saying, you said the wrong thing. We don't like it. So we're here to take corrective action. And that is nothing that we can abhor in a constitutional republic where theoretically, based on promoting the general welfare, where we have life, liberty, and the ability to pursue our happiness, and the government stays the hell out of our way. Okay. So we've reached the end of the AM Rad Pod for the day, guys. Appreciate you as always. I do have a fun palate cleanse. Saw this one. I think this is a fun way to close us out for the day. When we went to the wrestling last night, we had to use some public transit. They'd set up some trams for us. And I saw this. If you want to get a good seat on the bus, this is how you do it, guys.
Pyramide.
My man deserved that fist bump from her. She wasn't even going to fight him over it. All right, guys. We'll plan to be back with you tomorrow, noontime, here on Rumble and YouTube. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.